Hi, I'm Joseph Crudup. Welcome to my storybook. Today I'm going to read this book called Angelou, Green in the Morning. I hope you enjoy me reading it, and I hope you enjoy me watching this video while I'm reading this book. Let's begin, please. Angelou was 3 years old when she went to live with her grandmother in Stamps, Arkansas. She and her brother, Billy, had been living with their parents in California. The family had moved west from St. Louis, Missouri, where Marla was born in 1928. But times were hard. But times were hard, and Marla and Billy's parents decided that it was best to separate. The children's mother, Vivian Bexell Johnson, felt that she could not properly care for the loved ones on her own. So she carefully placed name tags around the wrist of her two small children and pinned their tickets inside her son's jacket pocket for safekeeping. Then she placed the tiny pair on a train heading east. The name on Marlon's tag reads Margaret Johnson, Johnson, for that was the name she was given at birth. But all her life she wouldn't be known as Mela, Mala. It was Bailey's special nickname for her, short for my sister. Even there, when she took her husband's last name, she kept her brother's nickname for her. She became known as Mala Angela, one of America's most famous widows. Marla and Bailey learned to look out for one another on the long train ride across the country. The strong brother-sister bond that grew up between them had its roots in that early trip. Marla was too long to remember the months us about those long hours spent together, but she always recalled how kind the other passengers had been. As the train nearly Arkansas, they even shared the fried chicken and potato salad from their own lunchboxes with their frightened children. This was children's first taste of black Southern hospitality. Perhaps this mood person helped to make the trip seem more like an adventure to the little girl and less than a scary journey to a strange, new place to live among unknown people. Marla and Bailey arrived safely in the small town of Stamps and began their new life with Mama, and they called their father's mother. The children never knew their grandfather Johnson. Their grandmother was married a man named Henderson, but he no longer lived with her when they arrived. Mama Henderson lived with their Uncle Willie, in the wheel of the general store that she had owned for 25 years. Everyone in town knew and respected Annie Henderson as a good businesswoman and a church-going member of the community, more than just a place to buy groceries. The store, as it was simply called, was a gathering spot for the black folks of Stamps. On hot summer days, the local barbers offering their costumes, haircuts, and shoe shines in the shade of the front porch. There was gossiping and laughing and cool lemonade at Mama's store. Sometimes Marla and her brother help out behind the concert at the store. They learn how to measure out the right amounts of flour and sugar, and to make change for the customers. Once in a while, they couldn't resist treating themselves to one of the fat pickles from the big barrels that lined the walls of the shop. They can only gaze longingly at cans of sweet, juicy pineapple rains. Mama kept staggering and hide up on sleighs. Such treat was sold only on holidays and special occasions. Because of a childhood accident, Uncle Willie could not get about easy. Most of the time, he sat he sat peace, he sat peacefully on a stool in the store. His his seat was placed to catch the cool breeze in the summer and the rifle of the pot bellying stove in winter. From there, Uncle Willie kept a sharp eye on his nieces and nephew, and customers and the comings and goings on the street. It was the early 1930s, and Stamps was in the heart of the segregated South. Segregation meant that black people and white people lived separately. Folks caught in the Jim Crow South, named after the laws that divided the races. The black South Stamps, called the Negroes section, was the popular South town. Him, Marla, and Billy lived with their grandmother and uncle. Marla could look out the window of her grandmother's door and see the cotton field across the street. Many of her grandmother's friends and customers just barely made a living by picking in cotton. Piece by piece, plant after plant, wall upon wall, they worked until they had filled enough bags to trade the food for food and clothing money. It was back-breaking work, and Mama said prayers or thanks every night that she and her grandchildren were spared that hard life. Marla, like her older brother, was good at school. They could, they both could say their times tables lick and split faster than any other children. Marla also loved to read. On her list of favorite wrestlers. On her list of favorite wills. When William Shakespeare and Edgar Allan Poe, but she had a special spot in her heart for the African American poets Paul Laurence Dunbar and Langston Hughes. How could she ever have imagined all those years ago that one day she would be named by little girls and boys on their own list of their favorite wills? In addition to school, Marla and Billy had daily clothes. Besides working in a store, they also learned to feed the pigs the musty mixture of corn and saw mash. Marla's tale, strong, hard-working grandmother believed in watchings for her family. Her family. There were regular, icy cold whisper-ups watching over by Mama, who stayed in the cleanliness, and, of course, there were weekly trips to church. For Marla's grandmother was a God-fearing woman, just keeping this family together with food on the table and clean, sewing and resale clothing was remarkable feat during those years. When money went out one winter, Mama began training good directions for her store to get the things they needed. Yellow Mala made a sign with crayons telling them what each their item was worth in trade. One day, a big man with a smile to Max pulling it up in a gray car outside of Mama's store. This tall stranger with the heartly laugh turned out to be Marla and Bailey's father. He had come all the way from California, setting for yearly Christmas presents. The children had really a haul from their parents. Sometimes Marla had even imagined that they were dead. Papa Bailey Johnson's visit caused quite a stir. Marla and Bailey soon learned that he had come to take them away from with him. Marla was sad to be leaving moments, but she was also excited about the trip ahead. Both children were eager to see their mother once again. After the long drive by car, Marla and Bailey were reunited with their mother in St. Louis, Missouri, as Marla described in Angelou's letter. It was love at first sight for the two children. She remembered meeting a very pretty woman, more like a stranger than their mother. She also remembered how quickly they were to each other. The children said goodbye once more to their father, and so began their new life with the woman they called Mother Dear and their grandmother Baxter. St. Louis was very different from Stamps. The streets, for all the pavement, seemed dirty. The buildings were all larger. There were new foods to try, like the delicious thin sliced ham from the deli, and there were other changes to get used to. The school Mallow and Bailey now attended was very different from the one they had no back in Stamps. After the feeling slowed down in the South, people seemed to be talking a different language, and nothing Stamps had prepared them for this city full of buses and trucks and people who always seemed to be in a hurry. While she was living in St. Louis, a terrible thing happened to Mala. When she was 8 years old, she was sexually abused by a man friend of her mother's. One day, while they were in the house alone, the man touched Mala in ways he had never done when her mother was present. At first, Mala told no one, but her mother and Bailey noticed how upset she was, and she told them the truth. They took her to the hospital to be examined and helped her by listening and talking to her. Although what had happened was not her fault, Marla felt so guilty Mela felt so guilty when she had to testify against the man in court that she decided after the trial not to talk at all. Her mother and her brother understood Marla's pain, but the rest of the family grew impatient with Marla's silence. Marla's mother thought that it would be best for her daughter to be away from the place when something is so horrible had happened. So it was decided that the brother and sister will return to their grandmother in Arkansas. This was not meant to be a punishment, but Marla blamed herself for having been sent away. It was only many years later that she realized that she had done nothing wrong. After St. Louis stunts at first seemed like a tiny and dark place, still, for a time, Marla and Bailey were the center of attention. Friends and neighbors stopped by constantly to hear their stories about the big city up north. The big city up north. Of course, Bailey always did all the talking. It would be a whole year before Marla began to talk again. The person who helped her to understand that it was safe to trust adults again was a neighbor and friend of her grandmother. Her name was Barbara Flowers, and she was known as the richest African American woman in Stamps. Marla had always watched the education and elegantly dressed Miss Flowers as she passed by Mama's store. Often, Miss Flowers would stop to chat with Marla's grandmother, and she always had a kind of word for the quiet little girl. Miller was surprised and delighted when one day Mrs. Flowers asked Miller to join her. Together, together they walked to Mrs. Flowers' tiny home. Once there, Milo was invited to share homemade cookies and lemonade while Mrs. Flowers read aloud to her as if in a dream. Milo listened to this woman's beautiful voice. Mrs. Flowers then offered him to lend Malo's books to read wherever she liked, but Malo had to promise to read them aloud to learn to be proud of the sound of her own voice. So impressed was Milo by the genuinity, genuinity of her new friend that she forgot to mistrust adults and began speaking again. As time passed, life in Stouts took on its own familiarity, and Marla and Bailey once more felt at home there. On central Sundays, they would go with their grandmother to revival meetings. There were, these were picketing, nourishing gatherings in the name of the Lord, held inside huge tents pitched for the occasions. It seems as if all of Black Stouts turned out for these events. There was much preaching and saving of souls. To finish up, the rich open tones of gospel music rose up towards the heavens. On the other days, there were town-wide penance to attend, picnics to attend, and movies to save up for. And Milo never forgot one special night when the whole town gathered around the radio in Mama's store to listen to the boxing match. There was no ordinary sporting event. This was the African American boxer Joe Louis, the Brown Bomber, defending his heavyweight title. It seems to Milo that the whole world was longing for to bury her than an announcer that evening. No one dare, no one ever dared to breathe in as they listened closely for the outcome of the match between Louis and his German opponent, and no one could contain their pride when Joe Louis was declared the winner. It meant quite a lot to the humble black folks of Stumps that someone who once had also been as poor as they were, who had also suffered in the indignity of unfair Jim Crow laws, who known as the world champion, Marla joined happily in the celebration. As she slowly became a lone woman, Marla learned many things about growing up. She learned how to make a trust of friends when she met Louise Kendricks, a schoolmate who shared her love of books. She also had her first crush when a boy in her school sent her a Valentine. There was more better lessons in those years as well. Marla was growing up in a time when racism still dictated that African Americans should look forward to become mayors or athletes instead of writers or science. Once, when she was suffering from a toothache, she learned that a white dentist could refuse to treat her, even if no black dentist could be found for miles around, but instead defeated the long guard. These injustices made her more determined than ever to make something of herself. All her life she had seen her grandmother face hard times without giving up hope. As Marla and Bella began to grow up, Mama realized that she wasn't getting any longer. It was time. She decided. for them to try living with their mother once again. By then, Vivian and Baxter had had divorced and moved back to California. Because the train failed to Sunset, faraway place was high. They would have to make separate trips, as Mama was able to scrape together the funds to pay for each ticket. First she and Mara and little Barry made the longer journey. It was the first time in their lives that Mara and Barry were separate. This and the dog being reunited with their beautiful but unfairly mother made Mara nervous. This time, she was unable to enjoy the sights and sounds of the trip back across the country as she had as a top. Once the small family was reunited in California, it was time to say goodbye to Mama. She headed back to Arkansas to be with Uncle Willie. Just as Marla and Billy were settling into their new lives in California, World War II began. 13 years old, Marla was now witness to the form of racism different from what she had seen in the South. This time, it was Japanese Americans who were treated unfairly because America was at war with Japan. Many Asian American families were forced to sell or leave their homes and businesses and go to live in crowded camps because of their background. It was as unjust as the Jim Crow laws of the Deep South, but few people spoke out. Later, when she became a well-known Marla Wood, Marla, who had always been a good student, was given a scholarship to attend the California Labor School when she was 14 years old. She also took evening classes in drama and dance. At 16, a year old then Marla Bailey was the first to leave home. He decided to learn the railroad business, and so he took a job with the Southern Pacific Railroad Company. Marla sadly said goodbye to her brother. For so many years he had been her closely companion. Barely's leaving left in a hole in Marla's life, and she decided that it was time to take a job herself. Marla looked around and decided that she would like to become a conductor tailor on the San Francisco streetcars. She would wear a crisp navy blue uniform and collect the passengers' money as they got on the trolley. She would be just like the neatly dressed long people with important looking chains holders hanging from their belts that she saw on her daily rides. But when she went to apply for the job, she was told that she couldn't even fill out an application form. African Americans, male or female, still were not allowed to serve as conductors or conducting waiters. Marla refused to accept that unfair practice. Day after day, she went back to the place where the hire was done. Finally, one day she was allowed to fill out the forms for the job. After a number of tests, she was hired. Marla became the first African American conducting engineer on the San Francisco streetcar. For a while, the excitement of becoming a working girl turned Marla's interest away from school, but she had always trusted about her brother Bailey's advice, and now he urged her to get her high school diploma. the war had finally ended, and days for celebrating the victories over Germany and Japan were declared. The year was 1945. When Missouri High School in San Francisco had its graduation ceremonies, Marla was among the stewards receiving their diplomas as the nation celebrated the end of the war. It was also a day of personal victory for the little girl from stamps who had always loved books. Shortly after her graduation, Milo went to her mother with some news that she could no longer keep secret. In a few months, she was due to give birth to a baby. Because she and the baby's father did not love one another, they decided not to get married. A few months later, her son was born. Marla named the child Clyde Bailey Johnson. She could not help feeling a bit scared when she thought of all that she had to learn about being a mother. But she also felt a tremendous amount of love when she looked at her sleeping child. At the age of 17, she had become a single mother. Vivian Baxter, now a grandmother, stood by her daughter. Still, Marla felt that it was time for her to make a life of her own. She needed to find a way to support herself and her children. She tried many jobs in those first years of motherhood. For a while, she became a cook in a restaurant, serving extremely dishes of the Southern style cooking of her girlhood. She also tried her hand at what at waitress and waitressing and waitressing and driving in a car. In lean times, she took two jobs to keep food on the table for her and little Guy, as her son came to be known. But always, Marla kept her mind alive by counting to read. When she could, she took dance lessons as well. No doubt her love of music drew Marla to take a job in a local record store. She was happy to be working steadily. She also enjoyed helping in the customs to find out selections from among the recordings by the great jazz musicians of the time, such as Charlie Parker, Daisy Gillespie, and Thelonious Monk. While working in a record store, Marlowe met Charles Angelos. Charles Angelos, who was a great sailor who shared her love of African American music and her affection for Guy. Before long, Marla and Charles were married. The new Mrs. Long, the new Mrs. Angelos quit her job, and for a time was happy staying at home and being a wife and mother. But Marla had always been active and independent. As time went on, she became less and less happy with her role as a housewife. Marla began to miss her old lifestyle and her freedom. Finally, Marla and Tosh decided to divorce. Once again, Marla was on her own. She began looking for a new way to support herself and her son. Music and the arts. Music and the arts have always been a part of Marla's life. Gospel spirituals have filled the church every Sunday back in stamps. The soulful voice and rhythms of those songs were like second nature to her. Meanwhile, the lessons she had in advancement in all those years had turned in her into the graceful dancer. Marla was ready to give the difficult entertainment business to try. Despite her years of training and natural talent, it was rough going that fast. It was a life of late hours, shabby in nightclubs, and poor pay. Still, Marla was learning the business. During this period, she first adopted the stage name that she would keep throughout her life. Because there was another performer named Malagrana in a club where she danced. She had decided to go by it. Bella Wynne was suggesting that her last name, Johnson, was too common for showbiz. She invited an easier to say version of her married name. Somehow, the new combination, Mala Angelou, seems to fit her just right. Mala now began to work hard to learn her name craft. It was the early 1950s, and there were not many good roles show business for African Americans. The powerful men who decided who get job through the most people didn't want to see black performers. But Mala was patient and persistent at least. She was rewarded for her work. She was chosen to be a member of the all-black cast for the Mrs. Paullian Bees. The show was about to tour Europe, and Mala could hardly contain her excitement over the chances to travel to places like Paris and Rome. Guy, and now total, was staying with his grandmother in San Francisco. In Europe, the company was a success wherever it performed. Milo saw many exciting places, and the cast was like a second family. But after a while, she began to miss her son a great deal and knew it was time to return to the States. She did not want God to grow up without a mother. Back home again, Milo made a living as a nightclub singer. It wasn't as glamorous as touring with a production company, but it allowed her to be near her son and mother. It was it also gave her some time to grow as a person. For Mala, it was a time for absorbing the world around her. She noted tiny details wherever she went. Later, she put into words what she saw and felt at that time. It was the beginning of her career as a writer. Huh. Mala opposing this new phase of her life with all the energy she had brought to other experiences in the late 1950s and early 1960s. There was only one place for the black woman to be, New York City. Many of the best writers of the day were already living there. Mala packing up her little family for the move back east. In New York, Mala became a member of the Harlem Rose Gallery. Every week, a, a group of African American men and women got together to read and listen to each other's writing. They were friends, but they were honest and open when they commented on what they heard. Marla listened and learned, but her life in New York was not devoted only to writing. It was the time of the civil rights movement in America. Black people across the nation, headed by leaders like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and demanding their equal rights under the law. Marla joined the struggle and soon became known as an artisan for racial justice. At Dr. King's advancement, she became the Norton Commodore of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. She organized meetings and joined in marches aiming at changing unfair laws. It was a great moment in her life when she first met Reverend King and heard him speak. His rich voice and startling message of brotherhood and sisterhood left quiet an impression on his diners, including Marla. So inspiring one of the members of the whole group that night that they decided to put on a show. The performances will raise money for the cause of disintegration and the disintegration of the suffering family laws for everyone. Marla helped write the show's script, which was called Cabaret for Freedom. Through her work as a web, a civil rights artist, and an entertainer, Marla began to meet many of the best known black men and women of her day. She was proud to be introducing to entertainers like the famed jazz singer Billie Holiday, actors like Harry Belafonte and Garfield Cambridge, the singer Abel Lane, and the musician artist Malcolm X. Marlon moved in these new circles with the same proud grace she brought to all her activities. At the same time, Marla was becoming a famous in her own right. In 1969, she published the first and best known of the books about her life, I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings. This book, which told the story of her childhood in stamps, was so successful that she was asked to make it into a script for television. Marlowe also wrote many books of poverty. Her poems talk about being a lone woman, about learning to love, and about the struggles for black pride. In one poem, Hurling Hotskirts, she wrote how being a winner isn't always about who gets the most points in a game. Both feet flat. The game is done. They think I lost. I think I won. The rules are hopscotch, so that you lose if you start hopping on the one foot. But to Marla Angelou just standing upright, with both feet on the ground. It's also a challenge. Her poverty offered a message of hope. In the early 1960s, Marla met and fell in love with an African freedom fighter named Vasilina Make. His struggles against apparently the South African government's war that separated the races became hers. For a time during the 1970s, she moved with God to Africa to be with and support Make. As Americans, she and God was starting to see an entire continent of people their own color, the joy that felt at seeing the brighter colored goods of the marketplace, and feeling the hot African sun on their dark skin, reminding them that their ancestors had come from this land. In a sense, they felt as if they were coming home. Although Marla and her son enjoyed many aspects of their lives in Africa, there were promises as well. Marla's life and becoming a handsome mix of work, writing, and politics, and once again, she found herself trying to fit the mold of being a good mate and mother. Only now this meant holding a job, cooking last meals, and keeping a clean house. Every tension, she felt the need to leave Africa and to return with God to the life she knew best. All her life, Maya Angelou had been a proud, independent Southern woman. In 1981, she was filled a lifetime position as a professor at Wake Forest University in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. She welcomed the change to return to the slower pace of the South she knew it so well, and to teach others about the literature she had always loved. This did not mean that Milo Angelou's life was without excitement. She continued to travel and speak to London diners about the lessons she had learned throughout her life and about her writing. She received honors and awards wherever she went. Many people think of Milo Angelou and as a living symbol of African American culture and as a role model for long workers of all races. When President Bill Clinton was planning his inauguration celebration in January 1993, he wanted someone to write a special poem to honor the occasion. He chose Milo Angelou for the job, like the new president. Milo was raised in a small town in Arkansas, and, like him, she had come from a poor childhood and thought hard work had become the best at what she did. She had become an example of the American dream. Once again, Milo was faced with a new challenge. When she accepted the president's invitation, she knew what kind of poem she wanted to write. It should be a poem that represented all the different kinds of people who made up the world of the United States. A poem that spoke to and for everybody. She wanted to remind us all of past hardships overcome and also to point the way to future hope. One clear, cold January morning, before the entire nation, Milo Angelou stepping out to the microphone and delivering her poem. She had titled it On the Pulse of Morning. At that moment, people throughout the world saw how a little girl from the American South who once refused to speak could become a great and respected spokeswoman for the entire country. It was, it was as if she were telling the world that we all have something worth saying. Once more, Milo Angelou was reminding us why the cave bird sings. In her poem, On the Pulse of Morning, Milo Angelou speaks for people of all different races, backgrounds, and age, male and female, rich and poor. Her message is one of remembering well. As a nation, Americans have been, including some dark moments like slavery and segregation, but it is especially a poem about the hope that comes from facing it each morning securely and greeting it with joy. And it says, lift up your faces. You have a pension need for this bright morning dawning for you. History, despite its richness and pain, cannot be unlived, but faced with courage, need not to live again. Here, on the pulse of this new day, you may have the grace to look up and out and into your sister's eyes and into your brother's face, love country, and say simply, with hope, good morning. That's the last page of this book. In this book called Milo Angelou, Greeting the Morning. I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope you enjoy me reading this book. I love this book. It's my favorite. And until then, I'm Joseph Crudup. I hope you have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful time. And God bless you and yours. Peace and love.